Welcome to week 14, ladies and gentlemen. This week is jam-packed, and the return of the London Spitfire makes it extra exciting. This weekend we actually get 2 extra matches, so I don't want to waste any time here since there's a lot to cover. I'm going to be skipping over my results from last week just to save a little bit of extra time, by the way. But if you're curious and you still want to know how I did, I'll leave a pinned comment of it for those who really are interested. Now for this week's hero bans to try and set the scene. The hero pool this week will consist of Ashe, Reaper, Reinhardt, and Brigitte. It's kind of weird, but for once, all of the bans this week do have an impact on the game. No Rein Reaper means the death ball stuff should be vaulted for the time being. It also means that Winston Dive sticking around is also a possibility. Either that or you see a lot of Orisa Sigma bunker if I had to take a guess. With no Brig, that surely means you get more Lucio and Baptiste in her place. And with McCree in play, I'm interested to see if more teams stray away from Echo comps or if she is still a must pick. Those are some of my overall thoughts on what could be played though, so now let's get into the games. Starting off what will be a very long Saturday, the Seoul Dynasty get their second shot at the Shanghai Dragons. I'll be straight up honest, I'm not loving Seoul's chances. So many indicators point to this being a roll. Unless Seoul improves tremendously in a very short amount of time, this might get ugly. Perhaps they could play more Orisa Sigma and anti-Echo stuff in a desperate attempt to play better, but even then, Shanghai in my opinion will still be better. We've already seen them outclass Seoul with double shield a few weeks ago. It doesn't help that the Dynasty's confidence has been greatly diminished. They're on a mean losing streak right now. Their good start has been completely neutralized, and it's not the first time we've seen Seoul and players like Prophet, Gesture, and Badoshin have this type of issue affect them to start a season. Inconsistency just always seems to plague the Seoul Dynasty franchise. Shanghai appears to be miles ahead right now, which leads me to believe this will be a 3-0 in favor of the Dragons. The odds are stacked heavily against the Dynasty, and it will take a miracle to mount a turnaround against such a fierce opponent. The lack of confidence plus Echo comps will be too much for them to overcome. For the second game of the week, we've got the Chengdu Hunters taking on the London Spitfire in their grand return. We haven't seen the Spitfire in forever. It goes without saying that this game, along with their matchup on Sunday, will be key matches of the week. It's been over 2 months since that game with the Mayhem, so I have zero clue what to expect. Will they be really rusty, or will their high potential roster show signs of improvement? I have zero clue how much they have progressed in these last 2 months, nor do I have any idea how they'll perform with somebody like Echo on the table. Lucky for them though, Chengdu hasn't exactly been lighting up the scoreboard this year, so this potentially could serve as a good way to get back into the swing of things. In all honesty, this looks very winnable. Sure, Wrecking Ball being available once again is going to benefit Chengdu greatly and potentially form a chaotic battle that is tough for London to keep up with, but remember that they too have a ball specialist to counter Among if needed. Their other main tank player Ji-hoon turns 18 literally 1 day before this game, so he'll be eligible to play. Besides seeing how London can handle a totally unpredictable team, I'd like to think this game comes down to if anybody on the side of London can play a decent Echo. If Shui, Babel, or whoever else is good enough and the Spitfire can stay composed, then I honestly believe they will win. London matches this week are pretty much one big guessing game, so you know what? I'll take a shot in the dark and pick them to beat Chengdu in 5 maps. Both of these teams love to go to map 5, so why not? Besides Echo and maybe main tank, I'll be paying attention to Glister versus Leave. These are 2 of the most exciting rookie hits game prospects we have in the league, and I'm curious to see how they stack up with each other. If one of them pops off big time, then it might end up being the difference maker that decides who wins this series. Next up on the schedule is the NYXL versus the Guangzhou Charge. Last time these two played, it was a completely one-sided affair, but with how strong the Charge were looking with Nero on Echo, they might have a better chance this time around. Who Are You, on the other hand, was looking kind of whack, I guess you could say. Not too amazing. Plus, if double shield gets played, that in my opinion could favor the Charge tanks in the end. But if we get into more dive stuff, then I lean more towards NYXL. That said, main tank, off tank, and flex DPS will be the 3 matchups I look at closely. The thing is though, the Charge weren't really challenged last week, even if it was a pretty dominant game. I don't know their full capabilities with Echo stuff just yet. Meanwhile, the NYXL, even though Who Are You wasn't the best Echo, they were going toe-to-toe anyway with Shanghai in a game they nearly won. The Charge haven't even come close to challenging Shanghai, which could in turn signal a possible skill gap. What's interesting about these 2 teams though is how different they are stylistically. New York tried all sorts of different strategies against the Dragons while also favoring Tracer over Sombra. Meanwhile, the Charge mostly stuck to their guns with Soul while preferring the Sombra instead of the Tracer. If we see a lot of the same stuff from last week being played, how will that translate into the final result? Who gets more value out of their philosophy on what to play? In my opinion, it's gotta be New York. When Sabiobi is in the game, New York is arguably at their strongest, so my final prediction is a 3-1 NYXL victory. Who's gonna stop that guy? In my opinion, nobody on the charge can, especially when there's no Brigitte for the extra crowd control if he plays Tracer. Between Sabiobi, Mono, and various strategies, New York should be able to win while maybe encountering some resistance along the way. The Paris Eternal versus the Los Angeles Gladiators. This one I'm very much looking forward to, and it's a key match of the week for sure. With the current state of Paris, I for one think these two match up pretty well with each other. I'm expecting a good game. On Double Shield, I believe things could be very even. That Hanbin versus Space Sigma matchup might end up being legendary. As for DPS, Soon and Birdring are both around the same skill level in my opinion, so that too cancels out in a way. Where things get interesting though is Flex DPS. From what I saw last week, Mirror was the better Echo player. He played a clean series against Toronto. Nico had his moments too, but he did make some noticeable mistakes. So in that regard, I give the Gladiators the edge. Then on support, FD God and Big Goose feel like a similar type of player to me. Their styles are pretty comparable. If they both play Lucio, then I suspect they both make the same types of big life-saving plays. Flex support is a bit more unique though. Shaz is a consistent player. We know him very well by now. The Eternals' newest addition fielder, we do not though, and now he's the only option because Gray recently retired. From the small sample size we have of this guy though, he appears to be an absolute monster. In that Philly game, he played like a madman on 200 ping from Korea. If he can play that well on high ping against Alarm of all people, then what's stopping him from doing the same against Shaz? Seeing how Fielder does in a follow-up game is something to monitor. If ping proves to not be an issue once again, then that might be the deciding factor that gives Paris the small edge at the backline. Whether it could be dive or bunker, I like both of these two a lot. Paris has been beating better competition, so you think I'd go with them in this scenario, but my gut is telling me to pick the Gladiators. I have them winning this in 5. My main reasoning behind this decision is simple. For one, I have no clue if Fielder can play out of his mind on 200 ping again. That game against Philly is going to be hard to replicate. Playing from so far away could yield pretty inconsistent results. And 2, I personally believe the Gladiators hold the slight advantage in the Echo battle. I know it was against Toronto and all, but I fell in love with Mirror's Echo last week. However, I firmly believe this will not be a cakewalk. After throwing in a map 5 scenario last week, Nico made it known on his social media that he took it hard. Since then, he's been grinding Echo non-stop on stream, so I expect him to give us a much better showing this time. However, I have my doubts on if that'll be enough, just because the Gladiators could be getting the better of Paris at other positions and on certain compositions in general. It should be a good show for sure, but I for one believe the Gladiators will squeak by and get a well-needed win. Up next on the schedule is yet another key match when the post-Runaway era Vancouver Titans play a struggling Justice team. With this being their first game, can the Justice hope to exploit the newbies and finally snap their losing streak? It surely seems like it's in the realm of possibilities, but the thing is, these Contenders players are hungry. They finally made it into the Overwatch League after all this time, and they want to make the most out of it. Tier 2 players aren't to be taken lightly. Contenders teams have literally beaten Overwatch League rosters in scrims all the time throughout the years. It's not like these guys suck or anything. A matter of fact, this Vancouver roster has some Overwatch League caliber talent. Dalton is an absolute beast. He's been carrying in Tier 2 for years now. Something tells me he might ball out in his debut. And now that Corey has announced his retirement, I don't know if anybody's going to be able to keep up with him on the side of the Justice. And the cruel reality is that Washington looks lost. Roar's been inadequate, Tuba only shows flashes, and the support line has been average, and now that Corey's gone, they have a gaping hole at hitscan DPS. However, this is their chance to finally stop the bleeding. It's a very good opportunity. But if they can't beat a new roster fresh out of Contenders, then there's probably little hope at this point for these guys to salvage a disaster of a season. This is winnable. This is definitely a game they could end up winning in the end. This team should be around their level. However, the Justice lack confidence, and this new Titans team is probably filled to the brim with it after receiving this promotion. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm being disrespectful, but I have the Titans taking this series 3-1. I have faith that this new team can be decent. In their first game, they'll be eager to prove themselves, and they don't even have to worry about potential stage nerves. If anything, they're in their home turf here. They're used to this by now. They've been playing all their matches online for a while, so if anything, they'll feel right at home. Meanwhile, the Justice tend to feed off of that crowd energy, and they can't now. There's a good chance I'm wrong about this because I've literally never seen this new team play before in an official match, but I'm feeling risky this week. Anyway, moving on to the next game on the schedule, we have the Houston Outlaws versus the Atlanta Reign. Let's face it, last week proved to be a disaster for both of these guys, but the question is, who looked worse? The obvious answer to that is Houston in my opinion. Sure, the Reign got reverse swept, but at least they took some maps in their series. I'm sure that Atlanta is going to play angry now. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at the Outlaws if they have to, and I have doubts on how well they'll be able to handle that. In my opinion, that Reign slip-up is not going to happen for a second week in a row. It could happen again in the future, but I don't think it's going to happen again this week. Plus, you could argue the Outlaws are even worse than the Valiant, and I don't know if Harsha has what it takes to throw Atlanta off guard, especially when you consider the fact that the Outlaws seemed pretty interested in running the mirror in that shock game, and that's exactly where the Reign excelled in the Valiant series. That's where they want you. Unless the Outlaws draw up this elaborate anti-meta plan, I expect them to get dominated. I've got the Atlanta Reign winning this in a clean sweep. The Reign should be better in every way possible, and I don't believe they'll be messing around this time. While I do think the Reign have been a disappointment and are kind of overrated at the moment, losing to the Outlaws would just be flat out embarrassing, and it feels improbable to me. The Reign learn from their mistakes and play a clean and complete series this time. No choking. To finish up what will be a long Saturday, the Valiant play the Boston Uprising. With a big win over Atlanta under their belt, LA has a chance to build upon their momentum and start to seriously improve their record. And what better opponent to run into in this kind of scenario than the number 20 team themselves? While Boston did show signs of minor improvement in the Florida game, they still do have a long way to go. This team rarely looks super competitive in a series. The Valiant might not be amazing, but it's clear as day that even they have a leg up over Boston. This one is easy. The Valiant win 3-1. Knowing the Valiant, they'll find a way to slip up and make this closer than it should be, or maybe the Uprising simply just start to play better. Either way, I still expect the Valiant to mainly be in control. What I'm curious about though is if LA decides to go anti-Echo again or not. KSP might not have Ash at his disposal this week, but he does have access to Widow and McCree, so maybe the Valiant decide to go with him and Shaxx again. If not, it'll be interesting to see how Apply and Color Hex match up with each other if the Valiant play Echo. Now for day 2. First up is the Hangzhou Spark versus the Shanghai Dragons. What is it now? The third time these two have played each other, I believe? And as far as I'm concerned, nothing's going to be any different this time. My stance on Shanghai against other Chinese teams will not change. It's so clear that they are far better than the rest of the lot as it currently stands. Until somebody proves me wrong, I will continue to expect the Dragons to come out on top in these divisional matchups. They are better coached, their understanding of how to play the game is better, and they almost always have a read on what the Spark want to do. It's very hard to imagine the Dragons losing this game. If the NYXL couldn't stop them, then what hope do the Spark have? I guess they could theoretically take advantage of the Dragons having to play 2 games while they just have the 1 to prep for this week, but in my opinion, that still won't be enough. The Dragons have them beat out. The Spark on Echo, Sombra, Winston are good, but so is Shanghai. If they opt in a double shield, Shanghai's better in that regard too. While I would like to see this series be a good one, it's pretty much wishful thinking. Shanghai takes it 3-0 and continues to assert their dominance in the Asian region. Even though the Spark showed promise on Echo Dive, it feels unrealistic for them to be better at it than a loaded Shanghai team that has consistently had their number. And now, for the final game in Asia, the London Spitfire take on the Guangzhou Charge. This, in my opinion, will serve as London's first challenge in their return. The Charge may not be a super scary team this year, but you can't exactly take them lightly. With that said, London is a whole different beast. For all we know, they might come into the Asian region looking better than ever. A young team with raw prospects are bound to improve if they are coached correctly, and I for one believe the Spitfire coaching staff is very capable. Many of their young players have already shown great promise this year, just not on a very consistent basis, unfortunately. The question is, can somebody like J-Mac or Krillin or Hiley, whoever it is, step up to the plate and help shoulder the responsibility more consistently? I 100% believe in Glister, even Sanguinar and Bernard too, but everybody else needs to show me they can do it as well. I don't have complete faith yet. Even in their wins, it's not like it's been pretty. It's come down to a map 5 every single time. Sure, it shows they're clutch, but it also shows they aren't able to close out a series very easily yet. As tempting as it is to go with them, I don't think they're ready just yet. They need like another week or 2 in my opinion. I'm going 3-1 Charge. Their veteran status and experience will give them the edge against a young London roster that could still be trying to figure some things out right now. Now then, for the 3 remaining games in America, we start with the Dallas Fuel versus the Philly Fusion. This should be a fun one. Philly are at the top of their game, and Dallas is starting to heat up. Between Gamsu versus Sato and the DPS battle, I'm super pumped. It's hard to get much better than Carpe and Hisu versus Decay. Those are some of the most mechanically gifted players in the game going head to head. Not to mention that we get another look potentially at Doha and EQO on Echo. Each of these teams have a very similar style to one another. They tend to look towards their DPS to carry them or open things up for everybody else. I mean, we've literally seen Carpe do it for 3 years now, and Decay has become the same type of superstar for Dallas in 2020. I kind of expect the hits game players on both sides to roll no matter what happens in this game. It all really depends on their other teammates more than anything. When it comes to Echo, I prefer Philly. I wouldn't say Doha is bad or anything, it's more that EQO looks insane. You can really tell he's been grinding. For the tanks, I could definitely see Dallas holding their own. Where I see Philly pulling ahead in the end though is at the support line more than anything else. Funny Astro and Alarm are arguably the #1 support duo in the league. It's hard to compete with something like that. They are so much better at keeping their team up in dire situations while setting up difference-making boops in sleep darts or just fragging out themselves without any help. Dallas can't match that in my opinion. They'd have to play a near flawless game to stand a chance. Because Philly has this noticeable advantage, I believe they take this game 3 maps to 1. However, I am expecting Dallas to put up a fight. This won't be a totally one-sided affair. Dallas has improved a lot since the beginning of the season, and I think they'll show that. But in the end, their disadvantages will hinder them from winning. The Toronto Defiant versus the San Francisco Shock. I'll cut right to the chase here. This is a mean mismatch. Toronto, in my opinion, are a bottom-tier team at the moment, and the Shock appear to be back to normal. Even without Sinatra, their resolve is staying strong. There are so many places where the Shock completely outclassed the Defiant. To start, I believe Super and Smurf are noticeably stronger players than Beast. Second, the Shock DPS put those on Toronto to shame, and that's saying something because Toronto's DPS aren't even that bad. But it goes without saying that Striker can do anything Surefour or Logix can, but better. And I don't need to go into detail to remind anybody what kind of mismatch we're dealing with at Flex DPS. Agilities is having his worst year as a pro right now, and he has the unlucky pleasure of going against arguably the best Flex DPS and Echo player in the game. This in all likelihood should be an easy 3-0 for San Francisco. Mismatches aside, consider that Toronto is trying to gel together with new main support players thanks to Kelix recently retiring. So many disadvantages for them to overcome here. I don't like their odds. And lastly, to finish off Week 14, the Florida Mayhem play the brand new Vancouver Titans. I tend to really like Florida in Orisa Sigma comp, so this week could end up being very good for them. And maybe they'll take advantage of this brand new team that has little tier 1 experience. I have no clue what this Vancouver squad ceiling is going to be. From a general standpoint, they probably could be mid-table at best. But with how well Florida has been playing lately, mid-table might not even be enough. Those boys are on a roll right now. I know 2 of those 3 games were against Boston, but they're still on a 9-map winning streak right now. I have never seen a Florida team look so sure of themselves before. The infusion of youth and much improved coaching staff has propelled them into a new level. Sweeping Paris is a major indicator to me that these guys are legit. Because Vancouver is so foreign to me and the meta suits Florida's patient style, I have the Mayhem winning 3-0. And arguably their most comfortable meta, I doubt a red-hot Florida team would lose to these newbies. They won't let it happen. The tank synergy and explosiveness of their young stars will be more than enough to get the job done. With that said, this is going to conclude my predictions for Week 14. What do you think happens this week? Let me know down in the comment section, and if you enjoyed this content and you'd like to see more, be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. While you're at it, consider following me on Twitter at ATP Overwatch, joining my Discord server through the link in the description, or purchasing a channel membership for some exclusive perks. And as always, thanks so much for watching today's video, I really do appreciate it, and until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.